So a McDonald's employee denied to give service to an officer, and all he wanted was a damn Happy Meal. Because he been out serving and protecting the community all day, you know, doing his civil service duties and all. And he get to McDonald's because he probably had a bad day, and all he wanted was a Happy Meal. So the person that denied it, the employee, they don't like the officer because what's going on with the whole Black Lives Matter movement stuff and the Blue Lives Matter movement. So you telling me he can't get a double cheeseburger with onions and cheese because of what happened in Louisiana? I'm confused. I'm trying to figure something out. What gives you the right to deny an officer some food and you working at McDonald's? Are you Ronald? Did you start the company? That's not your place, okay?
Well, good morning. Happy, smoky, and smoking Saturday to you. People are canceling events and all kinds of stuff because they think they're going to get all choked up out there. And it always surprises me. People smoke cigarettes, smoke weed, and then they got a problem if there's a little forest fire and the sun gets kind of blocked out a little bit. Think, oh my God, you got to stay inside. People putting those cancer sticks, is what my friend used to tell them, those cancer sticks in their mouth. And they smoke those every day. I see people standing outside of the Right Out Hospital that work there, smoking right there on the curb. And, oh, my goodness, if a couple forest fires start up, I don't know what we're going to do. We're just got to cancel the football game, cancel the potluck. Well, you're listening to the Live with Lou today, and we're out here on Mount Huth. We're right in the middle of this smoke out here in eastern Yuba County. Fires are burning right up on the hills above us. But right here at Mount Huth, we're not having a fire right here today. We're just, in fact, I don't know whether, unless the building caught on fire, I don't know whether we got enough to burn on this little mound we're on out here. So this is called The Patriot. There's also an FM side to this at 104.3, but you don't know what you're listening to. Somebody's interested out there. They tell us we got to tell what our address is on this radio. So it's 1410 AM. And if you're out there in one of those fringe areas and it's all scratchy or fading in, fading out, whatever's happening, you can go onto the website at kmycradio.com and click on the Listen Live button. And, man, if we're live streaming, then, you know, as long as Al Gore fixed the internet properly, we're cooking with grease. So today we're brought to you by the plumbing doctor, who makes sure things are always flowing in the right direction. And they'll get you handled 24 hours a day, and they're fast. They're my friends. I know these guys. I just don't pitch them because they pay me money, but they're longtime friends. In fact, they were over while I was in Vietnam recently. Ted Holmes, who runs Plumbing Doctor, he also has some construction projects he works on. And he was over working on my place, trying to keep my house from falling over. And so I just leave, and they come in and fix things. Also, we're sponsored by Greenitz Construction, and the only problem with Dave Greenitz, he specializes in bathrooms and kitchen remodels, But I always say, the problem is that when people get those things remodeled, they don't ever want to come outside anymore. They like them so much. It's hard to get people after the bathroom's done and all looks amazing. Like people say that heaven's cool, but I think people think that once Dave Greenis does the bathroom, it's hard to get people to leave the bathroom. You ever notice that? You can't get somebody out of the bathroom. You need to use it yourself. So Dave does amazing work and also does cool front doors and puts in whole house fans, all that kind of stuff. And we're also sponsored by the Sutter Buttes Tea Party Patriots. And if you're new to that, they're not promoting tea, they're promoting activism. And so Sutter Buttes Tea Party Patriots, and they've been around here, I think, about 7 years. In fact, they're going to have a barbecue to celebrate this weekend on the 4th. And they're going to have a Labor Day barbecue, a potluck, and a birthday party. They're celebrating their own birthday. That's 7th anniversary for the Tea Party Patriots. And that's going to be out from 1 to 4 in the afternoon at Church of Glad Tidings. And that's out at the corner of Live Oak and Eager, or Highway 99 at Eager. So there's a lot of ways to get there. If you're flying in, you can land on the Glad Tidings Airstrip, which is also called Highway 99. Or if you're helicoptering in, you can land on the soccer field right at the corner of Live Oak Boulevard and Eager Road. It's a real easy place to get access to. So 1 to 4 on Monday. And so the Tea Party Patriots, they're popping for the burgers, the dogs, the chips, and the refreshments. So if you're coming, there's no charge. They'd like you to come. But if you're coming and we're going to eat with them, they'd like you to bring a salad or a side dish if your last name ends A through P, and a dessert if you're Q through Z. So go out there and check it out. If you're not doing anything on Monday, you think, I'm going to go check these guys out. Go out. They're nice people. And have a good time out there. So, yeah, the Tea Party Patriots, they meet. I'm going to give you a couple bits of information here. I'll give it to you twice try a couple times during the event today. So they normally meet, other than this special time they're having on Monday, they meet at 6:30 the first and third Mondays of every month at the Church of Glad Tidings, same address, of course, and in Building 200. That's the first building on the left as you drive in the parking lot. So 6:30, and anybody can come. There's no membership. There's no cost to come. And they have a lot of good speakers. They kind of bring you up to date on what's shaking. And they're actually going to have a raffle if you show up at one of the meetings, $1 raffle. And if you win, you get to cut off a guy's hair. Now, this guy is kind of a hippie-looking guy, Bill Beeler. And these guys that you see him around, they're like 120 years old, and they got long hair, and they got about 12 hairs left, and it's long, and they got it all tied in the back. Well, Bill has some hair, but anyway, I guess he's going to decide to cut his hair, and you can cut it if you win. So check that out. They have a website, so if you ever wonder what's shaking, who's speaking, what's going on, you can go to Sutter Buttes Tea Party, all one word, .org, SutterButtesTeaParty.org, or you can abbreviate all that with SBTPP.org, SBTPP.org. That'd be the way to go if you want just a quick way to get on there. The other thing that the Sutter Buttes people, Sutter Buttes Tea Party Patriots have going is something I'm very interested in, is a course on the Constitution. And unfortunately, the public school system has given up teaching much on the Constitution, and federal judges and other judges are not paying much attention to the Constitution. In fact, I noticed I was watching Chris Ann Hall, who I'll talk about later. Chris Ann Hall, who also does courses on the Constitution. We've had her speak at Glad Tidings before live. She did a talk I was watching on the internet the other day where she was talking about the articles in the Constitution about federal judges and that they should only serve as long as they have good behavior instead of for the rest of their life. But the Tea Party patriots are very interested in the Constitution, and why shouldn't we be? Because what happens is you only benefit or get the rights that you know about, right? If you get an inheritance but you don't know about it and no one ever contacts you about it and somebody leaves something to you, then you don't get the benefit from it. The inheritance we have from our founding fathers is a Constitution, but if you don't know jack diddly about what it says, then somebody can just say, oh, well, this is the law, right? And it may be unconstitutional. In fact, I'm going to be talking about some instances that are judges, rogue judges that think their word is law rather than the law or the Constitution is law. But the Tea Party patriots are sponsoring a class called Institute on the Constitution, and called the Institute on the Constitution, and it's going to be taught by Tammy Reichard, and it's starting on September 20th. So today is the 2nd, so you got some time to think about it on whether you can jam that into your schedule, and that's going to be on Wednesdays, 6:30 to 8 o'clock p.m., at again, the same church location, Church of Glad Tidings, Highway 990 Eagle Road, but at a different room. The room is room 500. That's in the two-story building, the northernmost building as you go into the parking lot. It's got a green roof. You can't miss it. And building 500 and room 210, 212. So check that out. You can call to register for that course for the Constitution. It's amazing. If I had it to do over again, I was raising kids, I would take my children out there to learn about the Constitution. They'd be the smartest kids in any class, I'll tell you. But you can register by dialing up Tammy at 701-2845, 701-2845, or just email her at tjrikard, TJRIKARD @gmail.com. So, man, has it been amazing down in Houston? I have been, let me, before I get to Houston, let me just make some comments because Monday is Labor Day. And then we'll talk about Houston. Maybe we'll get to that in the second half hour. But Monday's Labor Day, and it happens to be a federal holiday. I don't know whether it's a state holiday too, but it's interesting, like, well, what's Labor Day all about? And it's really a union-devised day, and you'll notice on Monday there'll be lots of people working because if people just all stop working, the United States would shut down. Like, I get a kick out of some Christians say, you can't work on Sunday, yet they all go out to lunch afterwards at Red Robin or Applebee's or somewhere, and they expect all those cooks and servers to work. They think, oh, hypocrites. Oh, yeah, we're not supposed to work on the Sabbath. But then they want to go to the hospital, and they want a doctor and a nurse to be there and a tech and ward clerks. So sometimes we can be kind of hypocritical, but the Labor Day thing, if you ever think about, I always get confused because Labor Day is the first Monday of September, but then there's also May Day. May Day is May 1, and that's a communist day. That's a day for the workers to celebrate the workers overthrowing management, right? It's anti-capitalism. And the unions in this country are really anti-capitalist. They want to control everything about work. The unions do. Instead of just go to work and work, they want to control everything about work. So Labor Day is is Monday. It's also kind of known as the unofficial end of summer. Now hold that thought, because it's like somebody just said, I don't know how many degrees it's going to be today and tomorrow. Is it like going to be just hell 30? Is it hell 30? Yeah. 125 or something like that. Man, my house was like, it felt like a microwave oven. I could have just put roast beef out on the counter and just cooked it. Well, okay. I wanted to just mention there's a real misconception about work. And I wanted to tell, I always, when I got up this morning, I was thinking about Labor Day, and I thought, I wonder if the people that aren't working, whether that makes any difference to them, because most people in the United States don't work anymore. Did you know that? So, anyhow, some Christians, they think that work was a curse from God. Did you know that? And it's not. The work was given, not a part of the curse for disobedience of mankind, but it was given when God created the first human beings and placed them in a garden and said, hey, take care of the place. Maintain it, right? And here's the interesting thing. I've read a lot about health over the years, physical health, how to take care of yourself, what to eat, what not to eat, how to take care of yourself so you can feel good regardless of your age. But we're not just physical beings. We are spiritual beings. And, of course, if you believe that you came from a monkey, then you can just skip this part of the show and just turn on some other show. But I believe that when God created people, he created work for them to do because it sort of is part of who we are. And it's kind of like if you don't get exercise and eat the right things, you feel crappy, right? And your health goes downhill. And so the same way with work. Is it interesting to you when people retire from work? Sometimes they die right away because they don't have anything to do. They don't do anything with their life. They just think about themselves, and they just focus on themselves and sit around and go to the store and back, then stare at the wall or watch television. And it doesn't take too long, but they die. I want you to hold that thought. But, the Bible says that we ought to be serving, and helping other people. Like one place I was telling the guys in jail the other day that it talks about you ought to have more interest in the condition of other people than your own. And the Bible says to love yourself, so that means you really need to have a lot of focus on all kinds of people. So labor is a pretty cool thing. It's actually a part of our mission in God. Dan Aykroyd said, what was he called? Jake? Was he Jake? He's one of the Blues Brothers. He said, I'm on a mission, or we're on a mission from God. And really, that's what we should be on. But a lot of us don't know what's going on, right? It's just like some people don't know what kind of food to eat. And they don't know how they should be living. And they think maybe they were just created to do heroin or smoke weed or something like that, or be drunk all the time, or scheme and rip off the government, right? But people aren't really happy that way. People on welfare, they may act like they got it going on, but they are really living life on the low, down low. So I was thinking about this recently, this flood down here in Houston, and I was thinking about this quote from a guy named Dennis Prager. You've heard of Prager Institute. They have a lot of cool videos or educational videos, and I think I have one this show right stuck in the end of the show. It's on prosperity and capitalism. But Dennis Prager said this. I want you to listen to this because this helped me understand things on why liberals constantly are focusing on the wrong thing. It says, all my life, I have known this rule about people. Those who don't fight the greatest evils will fight lesser evils or even make-believe evils. This happens to be the morally defining characteristic of the left. I'm going to say that again for you, and then I'm going to give you a great example. All my life, I have known this rule about people. Those who don't fight the greatest evils will fight lesser evils or make-believe evils. This happens to be the morally defining characteristic of the left. Dennis Prager said that. When this flood happened down, and is still, the damages, of course, are going on, and will go on for some time, but when this flood occurred and the president and his wife flew down there, the media just wet their pants over a photo of the First Lady walking out of the White House to get in, I guess, in a helicopter, and she had high heel shoes on. And I don't know whether these feminists don't wear high heels anymore. Shame on them if they don't want to. I don't really care about high heels or no high heels, but it's like, why do people have to get all upset if a person wants to wear low heels or high heels or medium heels or go barefoot? But it doesn't matter whether the Trumps find a cure to cancer, they would be doing something wrong, or whatever they do, they're always wrong with this media. This is what Dennis Prager was talking about, fighting make-believe evils. So somehow the First Lady's evil because she's getting on a helicopter and plane wearing high heels. Now, have you ever gone on a trip where you took more than one pair of shoes or different sets of clothes for different parts of the trip? I have. Sometimes I leave for Vietnam and it's freezing in San Francisco, so I wear maybe some socks and shoes on the plane. But then when I get to Vietnam, it's steaming hot and I slip into some flip-flops, right? So I need to be prepared for both. And then when I fly back from Vietnam to San Francisco, I may start in flip-flops, but before I leave the airport, I'm back in socks and shoes because it's freezing down there in San Francisco, and maybe it's wintertime, and maybe cold all the way up the valley. So what, are we supposed to suppose or presume that the First Lady was going to wear high heels throughout the entire trip and even to bed at night? I mean, honestly, people, have we lost all our minds? We just are stupid? Or even focusing, you remember the campaign, they focused on the president's hair, his color of his hair, the color of his skin. Like, we didn't all focus on Obama's elephant ears and his black skin and all that all the time. You know, if you said anything about Obama, we didn't like his policies. Oh, you're a racist. Oh, we didn't like the way his feminine-looking pants. Oh, you're a racist. Oh, you didn't like this. The way he throws looks like a girl. Oh, you're a racist, right? Oh, you're a racist. But honestly, Melania Trump can't do anything without some trash talker out there running her down. Are we ready to go to, they said, we got Wiki Man and we got Robert E. Lee here today. We got a double bang behind the glass, Robert E. Leon. We're liable to have to fire him because his name's Robert E. Leon. He's going down with all the statues. All right.
Walk down a red carpet, you know, that can be life-changing for people. And so to be able to be part of that and see that and now be able to take that mindset to a field, because so much of handling sports is handling pressure. Well, what pressure do you have if you're 0 for 12 and you're at the plate versus someone that is fighting for their life versus someone that, you know, we picked up on the side of the street in Haiti because they're crippled or they're not wanted or they're thrown into the garbage? Like, how do you compare those things? And for me, there's not a comparison. And that's why you're able to handle sports as a game, because it still is. Yeah, we can pursue it. We can give so much of our time, energy, and effort to it. But at the end of the day, I know that's not why I'm here. It's not my biggest purpose. It's not my biggest calling. It's not what I want to be. It's not how I want to be known in my life. It's not as a football player, as a baseball player, as, someone that, worked hard to accomplish those things. I want my life to be so much more than that. I want to be someone that was known for bringing faith, hope, and love to those needing a brighter day in their darkest hour of need. And that is something that is a life calling for me, and so it's so much bigger than sports. But I am so grateful for sports because it's given me a platform to be able to share and love and care for people all over the world. So I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Hi, I'm Gil Fulbright, and I approve of whatever it is my wife is about to read off of this teleprompter.
Hi, I'm a politician's wife delivering a focus group message from what looks like the cover of Architectural Digest. I'm not behind a podium or out speaking with real people because as a prop, I'm best positioned in the home where I can conform to gender norms and exhibit aspirational family values. My practice smile should tell you all's well with the Fulbright house, while my lifeless eyes betray my disgust with my husband's backroom dealings with shady political cohorts. People ask me all the time, what's it like to be a politician's wife? Well, it's a privilege to be a part of the soul-eating circus known as the political machine. That is, once you've given up your dreams of doing something meaningful or worthwhile. So, probably what it feels like to be a voter. Go here to hear more from my husband, or go here if you'd like to donate to his Indiegogo page. Crushed it! Fucking crushed the tier, dude. Did you see that? Oh my God.
Okay, we survived the first half hour, so we got 2.5 hours to go. Some of you are happy and some of you are sad about that. Well, we were talking as we ended that first segment about liberals focusing on lesser evils or minutia like high heels on the president's wife while people are drowning in Houston, or make-believe evils. They just make stuff up. So I got a kick out of the media looks at every opportunity to slam anything conservative or anything that's God-fearing like Christians or churches. So if a church isn't just performing at top performance, top level, they slam it. So Joel Osteen's church, which is one of the more high-profile churches in the United States, whether you like them or not, that's not my point. But immediately, Christians and non-Christians slammed the Joel Osteen church that they refused to open up their church to help. And so, I've just got to the place where I can't trust anything I hear anymore from anywhere, including Fox News and those people. In fact, I hate Fox News being played on this show, but I haven't been able to get it off yet. They drive me nuts. And since I'm paying for the time, I think I ought to be able to control what's going on here. So we're working on that for all these you that are done with Fox News as well as the rest of them. It's just propaganda. So anyway, the word was that this very large church facility and the money behind it was not reaching out to help Houstonians. But then, as it turns out, at one point during the event, the flooding event, the church building, which is, I take it on high ground, was surrounded by water. And Osteen describes some kind of floodgates that hold water back around their area. I don't know how it works down there. Maybe it's like levees. Here they have what they call bayous, and we have bypasses. And, we got flooding issues ourselves. So I was thinking about our church that I attend, Glad Tidings. We have lots of buildings. In fact, we've taken people off the street when it gets too cold or too hot. They call it the rest program here in Yuba Sutter. And we just put people on cots and feed them, take care of them there, shower them, etc. So we do that as a routine along with a number of other churches in the community. However, and as a leadership out at Glad Tidings, I'm just using this as a comparison to Osteen, although I don't know Osteen and those people down there. We kind of have a plan that in the case of a disaster, we've discussed what we would do and how we would do it, because we have a lot of footage inside buildings. If you had electricity, that you could keep everything going and take in people. But the problem is, in the Yuba Sutter area, for instance, we're in the Sutter County, and if it flooded in Sutter County, I think that our church would be flooded, or it may be on high enough ground, but it may be surrounded by water. So how would you take in people if your own facility is surrounded by water? So Osteen's argument was, hey, for a time before the water began to recede, we were surrounded. We were dry, but we were surrounded. So anyway, I've watched him a couple times on the internet responding to these attacks, nasty attacks, bitter attacks. And I think, you know something? Why don't people just shut their mouth and just go help people and focus on what we can do instead of just hacking on all these church people, and maybe even taking information that they thought was true, but they're not even down there. So anyway, I've watched Osteen a couple times try to explain that the church is always open to helping people. In fact, has done that many times in the past and is doing that now. My point is that the media, which is very liberal in this country, is anti-God, is pro-abortion, is pro-communist, pro-socialist, is anti-Trump. Trump will never be able to do anything. It doesn't matter whether the stock market not only goes beyond 20,000, it goes beyond 40,000. It doesn't matter whether we achieve almost full employment, that all black young people and youth are employed, that we stop AIDS, that we stop cancer. Trump is still a jerk, will always be a jerk, and Melania is a slut. That's just the way they call it. And so they constantly focus on make-believe evils. Even though they won't attack people like the NAACP, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, Louis Farrakhan, and all these people who have done nothing for their own, if they want to call. It's interesting. I don't have my own people. When I say my people, I don't even have my people. But black people seem to think because their skin has got more melanin in it, that all of a sudden they're a different people than the rest of the people. You notice a problem there right away? Division. But the fact is that the black leadership, that what we think of the black leadership, the liberal black leadership in this country, has done nothing but spew out rhetoric and done nothing to challenge the stupidity and nonsensical philosophies of the black community, and all they've done is foster entitlement to promote their leadership, which never really gets around to accomplishing nothing. In fact, I just saw the new leader of the Black Panther Party that was just saying what I'm saying. He's saying, hey, the Democrat Party have pimped us out as black people. And I say, well, hallelujah to you. There you go. So it's so interesting to me that no matter what Melania does, no matter what Ivanka Trump does, they're constantly caught up in stupidness. In fact, I don't know whether you know, you saw a picture of the lady that runs Vogue that started this attack regarding the heels, high heels of Melania Trump. That gal she needs to be in a mental hospital. The way she was dressed, she looked like a clown. It was the most bizarre I mean, it was beyond a clown. A clown is like orderly. This gal was totally weirdo. But she is like, you could never say that about her in New York, I guess. Well, let's see. So I think the attacks on whether it's nitpicking Trump, remember Obama didn't even go down. Remember at some of the crisis that went on, Obama didn't even leave the White House. He went out and played golf. So either a conservative president, either he shouldn't have gone down, he should have gone down, he went down too late. It's just like, come on, man. It's just like, are we getting tired of this? Why, if you're still listening to media on television, why do you do that to your television? It's just like poking yourself with a pencil in the eye. It's just absurd. Well, I wanted to talk about a couple things here. How about this? These guys, these officers the other day that were shot in Sacramento, unfortunately, as voters, we get duped a lot. When you don't pay attention, you get duped. And this is where it really came back to bite us right in the behind. Because we've passed some propositions in the state of California. Now, maybe up here in Northern California and Jefferson State, we didn't go along with it, but we got outvoted by the metropolitan areas. That, to be fair, but sometimes I think we get psyched out and we vote stupid. But let me just tell you what happened. This shooting down in Sacramento, where some CHP officers were trying to track down someone, and they knocked on a door, and all of a sudden the person started shooting from inside the door, right through the door. And then he fled out the back and shot the Sacramento County Sheriff's officer and killed him. So this guy's name was Thomas Daniel Lightcloud. And he was using an assault rifle. And so Lightcloud was not an Eagle Scout. Lightcloud was a convicted criminal who, in my view, should not have been out on the streets. But state laws and court decisions and propositions that you and I vote on have turned our criminal justice system in California inside out. Now, I was at Juvenile Hall this last weekend, and I was with a guy who I've known for years, who's been in and out of jail and in and out of church. And he was a three-striker. He was down for life. And he, after about 5 years of doing his term, after getting 3 strikes, he really broke. And after doing stupid stuff in prison, and really turned his life over to Christ and changed so dramatically over the next years that when some of the propositions were passed, or AB 109 and stuff like that, that they reassessed his sentence and let him out, and now he's been good to go. No, he's not on parole, probation, anything. He's been out for 3 or 4 years. He married. He's got a job. He's doing good. He's straightened out. He's going to church. No meth, no robberies, no nothing. So there are situations where people need to be evaluated, and maybe there's an and they already did this in the criminal justice system. They reevaluate people when they come up for parole. So the lack and the watering down of meaningful penalties has emboldened some career criminals. And so Lightcloud was caught with firearms on multiple occasions. This guy had a history of shooting people and packing firearms. So 4 things have happened. We got Assembly Bill 109, AB 109, which was the realignment where a lot of state prisoners now will be held at the county level, and they kind of reevaluated what would qualify to go to state prison. And there was Propositions 36, 47, and 57, which lowered the penalties for criminal behavior, various types of criminal behavior. So the San Francisco Chronicle, of all people, a very liberal newspaper, described the extensive criminal history of Mr. Light Cloud. Let me read it to you. This is the guy who just shot 3 officers in Sacramento. This is in his past, not currently. Assault on officers and first responders, drug possession, robbery, grand theft, auto with stun gun, assault with stun gun, battery on emergency personnel, 2 counts of assault on peace officer or firefighter, 6 counts of assault with or possession of firearms, a federal indictment on charges of possession with intent to distribute methamphetamine, illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition, used a counterfeit credit card, and identity theft. This guy was wanted at the time, although I don't think they were looking for him. They were looking for somebody else, but they stumbled across Mr. Light Cloud, and everybody got, all 3 of the officers were recipients of his criminal behavior by being shot by him, with the Sacramento deputy dying. Now, is that crazy or what? So what we have in the United States, if you're following it around the actions of the United States, is we have a spirit of lawlessness. It's not everybody. Most people in the United States are law-abiding citizens that are going to work every day. Even Democrats are going to work every day. They're raising their families. They're taking their kids to soccer practice, to volleyball. They pay their taxes, and on and on. But we have a small minority of people that are not working, but they are out destroying buildings, lighting places on fire, intimidating people, beating up conservatives, preventing people from having free speech. They're creating chaos and anarchy in the United States, and they're actually being funded by liberal operations like George Soros and by other liberal operations that like Black Lives Matter, that's getting millions of dollars, right? These things aren't spontaneous operations. They are funded and highly organized. And so at some point, y'all that support law enforcement and law and order and want a peaceful neighborhood, a lot of times people think, well, the police this and the police that. Yet they expect by some magic that their neighborhood is going to stay orderly and legal and lawful. I got issues on my block all the time. I don't know about you. Maybe it's just where I live, downtown Marysville. I got issues going on all the time. People doing stupid stuff, camping out, right on the parking vehicles, storing vehicles, jacking vehicles up, working on vehicles, leaving them on blocks, crazy stuff, dealing dope, fighting, crazy stuff. So if you think that human beings are naturally beautiful and law-abiding and honest, you're obviously not in touch with reality. If you think that we're going to have a society that's peaceful without peacekeepers, like called police, involved, you have a mental problem. So recently there's a guy named Ibarra that was arrested by the Yuba City Police Department. Ronald Ibarra. And what happened? Let me just give you a little setting. Taco Bell on Bridge Street in Yuba City. Somebody called in from over there and said there's a disturbance out here. And so when they called 911, the police went over there and they found, yes, indeed, there is a disturbance going on here. And when the police officer approached Ronald Ibarra, who was, by the way, a parolee, I don't know exactly what went down, but it's all recorded. Isn't that great? Sometimes think, oh, police don't want recordings. Actually, if I was a police officer, I wouldn't have a problem with a recording on my body at all, with a camera on my body. Because when I've ridden with the police, I notice people lie. So there was about a 10-second clip on the internet, on Facebook, I saw it, of Ronald Ibarra and the police officer. You couldn't hear what they were saying, but you saw an interaction with them. They were close to each other, and it looked like Ronald Ibarra reached for something behind him, and the police officer, who was smaller, much smaller, began to try to take him to the ground to arrest him. And he hit him a couple times in the face, taking him down. So immediately people at Facebook jumped to the conclusion, I call them Facebook criminologists, jumped to the conclusion, oh my God. So, but Ibarra was taken to the ground, and I noticed on Facebook, because I'm connected with some people, handful of people, maybe 1,000 or 1,500, something like that. But one of the guys is the former police chief of Marysville, Jack Simpson, who I worked for as a volunteer chaplain for a number of years before he retired after a very long career of being a police officer in Marysville. So Jack Simpson went on the internet just by the clip he saw it entirely different. In fact, he knew Ibarra himself and knew his background, knew that he was violent. And he said, hey, that was a righteous takedown. Tone it down out there. But the bottom line is, from all the witnesses that were at the scene, who saw more than a 10-second clip on Facebook and made all their judgment from their comfortable air-conditioned home, those that watched it and those that videoed it, and when they took all the videos, including the cops' video, it was totally a righteous gig. But instead of prosecuting the guy, one of the deputy district attorneys decided not to prosecute it. And so I want you to think about something. When something happens, I mean, I know lots of law enforcement, and I know that when they arrest somebody and repeatedly arrest people that are then what I call catch and release, nothing really happens to them, it becomes discouraging, disheartening. You wonder, you begin to think, what's the use? Why pick them up, right? Just let them go nutso, kill somebody, beat somebody to death, rob somebody, and then maybe people will care whether you actually arrest them and they'll do something, right? So the Yuba City Police Department is disappointed and angry that the district attorney's office did not do anything about Mr. Ibarra when their guy had to do a physical takedown. Now, my friend across the street became a sheriff's deputy at Yuba County about a year ago, and he went right out on patrol. He had been in the jail, but then he moved out on patrol and about a year ago, and right away somebody wanted to fight, and it broke his arm. I want you to think, most people don't realize how many law enforcement officials get put out on light duty or they're on disability because they break a part of their body trying to make an arrest because people don't want to go peaceably. A lot of people think, some naive people may think that when the cop says to them, you're under arrest, and this person says, well, I don't want to go to jail. You're going to have to fight me. They say, well, forget about it then. I got other things to do. You can go on home. No problem. Forgive me for bothering you. If there's resistance and you need to, and they need to put somebody under arrest, there's going to be a fight. And if you wonder where a lot of your taxes are going, it's going because of like situations like where you got to take a big dude down and you only weigh 165. That dude weighs 265. And you got to take the dude down and get some cuffs on him and get him into the car, get him over to the station. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back.
Have you ever been face to face with a police officer and wondered, is he about to kick my ass? Well, wonder no more. If you follow these easy tips, you'll be fine. First, obey the law. Laws were made for a reason. Think of them as hints. You've heard people say, man, I wouldn't do that shit if I was you. Well, here's some of that shit. Carjacking, armed robbery, arson, selling drugs, buying drugs, stabbing, shooting. You know, you probably won't get your ass kicked if you just use common sense. If you jump a subway turnstile, you might just get off with a warning from the police. But if you jump a turnstile carrying a loaded gun and smoking a joint, then maybe you need your ass kicked. We all know what happened to Rodney King, but Rodney wouldn't have got his ass kicked if he had just followed this simple tip. When you see flashing police lights in your mirror, stop immediately. Everybody knows, if the police have to come and get you, they're bringing an ass kicking with them.
Police coming straight from the underground.
Here's a no-brainer. If you're listening to loud rap music, turn that shit off. Blasting the police while you're getting pulled over by the police is just ignorant. When an officer approaches your car, be polite.
Is there a problem, officer?
And stay in your car with your hands on the wheel.
What the f*** do you want, motherfucker?
Unless you want your ass kicked. Want to give a friend a ride? Not so fast. Your friend might be crazy. Now, before you let your friend in your car, ask them these questions. Do you have a gun? Do you have drugs? Do you have any warrants? And in case you do get pulled over by the cops,
License and registration, please.
remind your friend to do this one thing. Shut the f*** up.
Man, don't give him shit. What the f*** do you want?
If you have to give a friend a ride, get a white friend. A white friend can be the difference between a ticket and a bullet in the ass. Here's a tip you should never forget. If your woman is mad at you, leave her at home. Because a mad woman will say anything.
He got weed! He got weed!
If your woman is mad at you, there's nothing she'd like to see more than you getting your ass kicked.
That's right! Kick his motherfucking ass! Make him tell me shut up no more! Take his weed too! He got weed! He got weed!
Now let's review. Obey the law. Use common sense. Stop immediately. Turn that shit off. Be polite. Shut the fuck up. Get a white friend. And last but not least, don't ride with a mad woman. If you follow these simple pointers, you probably won't get your ass kicked by the police.
All right. Well, we just want to give you some tips out there, but Ronald Ibarra is smiling his way to the dope dealer, storing himself a little stash, knowing he got away with trying to put a whooping on the police officer, and nobody did nothing about it because we too intimidated. I wrote an article about this coming out in the Territorial Dispatch. You could check it out. This probably be on out available on Tuesday. Go on the internet at territorial dispatch.biz. And you can check it out on the internet, or you can get a hard copy. They're scattered about town in Yuba, Sutter, Nevada County. And you can read about it. But I suggested maybe we should just skip jury trials and just count up the likes and comments on Facebook and whether we're going to press charges on these things or not. Another friend of mine that helps me at Juvenile Hall a lot, she works in the local area, was raised here. Her grandmother, Leola Shreves, 94, back in January of 2013, was found beaten and dismembered. Isn't that amazing? I want you to think about your grandmother. I only got to know one grandmother. My grandparents had all died off by the time I came around, but I had one grandmother. I thought she was pretty special. And I couldn't imagine sitting here today if somebody told me that she was beaten, severely beaten and dismembered and cut up. I don't know what I would do. It would really I just didn't know what I would do. I don't know what I would think. I don't know what I'd do. It'd be overwhelming to me. So my friend, this was her grandma down there on Park Avenue, right down there by Yuba City High School in Yuba City. And so when the police responded and they looked the place over and began to do their investigation, a guy next door they eventually interviewed. And he confessed to the killing. So they arrested him. And this was during the Carl Adams, when he was the district attorney. And so at that time, if you look back and look at the articles, they discussed, including the judge, when they were arraigning the gentleman, the suspect, they discussed that this could be a death penalty case. And so, but before Carl Adams resigned, they didn't actually bring it to trial, and so it got handed off to Carl Adams' second in command, who was Jana McClung, who continued running the office until January of 2015, when Amanda Hopper was elected and took over at that time. So Carl Adams didn't bring it to trial, and then Jana McClung did it, and then it came to Amanda Hopper to do something with it. Now, in cases like this, I'm no attorney, I'm no cop, but in all these kind of cases that I've been familiar with, there's a lot of evidence that needs to be processed. Even if there's no criminal activity and someone dies and they need to do toxicology tests, it takes a while to get them back, even to when they perform an autopsy on someone to figure out why they died. People think, how come they don't have these tests back? Well, it takes a long time. Some longer than others for various reasons. And so time passes, and so in August 2016, Amanda Hopper decided to drop the charges against Michael Alexander of murder because, according to what I read, the document that she submitted, legal document, that there was no physical evidence connecting him to the crime scene, in spite of the fact that he confessed. So the interesting thing about this is that he remained in custody for over 3 years. Isn't that a long time? It's a long time to wait to, even whether or not you decide whether this fellow may have done this dastardly deed, for anyone or for the victims or the survivors of Miss Shreves, to wait 3 years to get justice. Don't you find something wrong with the justice system, the judicial system, that cannot bring somebody swiftly to trial? where you can determine whether someone did this or not, but just waiting and waiting. Can you imagine your grandmother being beaten and butchered, and you wait for 3 years? That in itself is what somebody would call adding insult to injury. But be that as it may, over 3 years come to pass, and then the charges are dropped. Pretty powerful. And so now Michael Alexander is suing the county of Sutter for millions of dollars. For holding him hostage in that jail cell for all that time and never. I think I would just be thrilled to get out of jail. Of course, if he really is innocent, then maybe he thinks, hey, these guys jerked me around. But actually, if he's guilty, if he did it, I'd just be happy to be out of jail and just fly far away. But all these kind of incidences where the Ibarra case, where all of a sudden a police officer who risks his life taking down a big dog doesn't get backing by the DA, or whether a gnarly murder is not prosecuted, it's frustrating for law enforcement. And so anyway, I wrote a little article about it. You can check it out at the Territorial. You can go pick up a paper. Actually, if you don't know where to get one, you can go over on 4th Street between D and E. That's where the headquarters is, and right out, you don't even have to go indoors. It's just a stack of them sitting out in the entryway. And so I also wrote an article called Marysville Bud and Bullets, and it talks about how times have changed in the city of Marysville. So, sorry, I'm trying to tell him I can hear him through the glass here. So, anyway, I wrote this article called Marysville Bud and Bullets about the changing times in Marysville. And it was fascinating to me because I read that a high school student, man, we just get started having high school, and already a student gets arrested by the Marysville Police Department, and they booked him into juvenile hall. It wasn't just a cite and release, man. They booked the dude. Now, I don't know whether the guy has a past record or not. The article didn't say so in the paper, one way or the other. But he was arrested because he parked his car in the parking lot, I guess, and of the school, and he had a shotgun in the back seat. Now, maybe, I don't know what your reaction is right now. Maybe like, oh, my God. But to me, I just think, hey, so what? Because I used to carry a shotgun because I used to hunt a lot. And when I was in school, it wasn't unusual for me to have a gun in the car occasionally when I was going to shoot or coming from shooting or whatever. But anyway, the student said he'd been trap shooting and failed to remove the gun from his car before school. Now, sometimes stories aren't true, right? But what if we assume that these are the facts? Here's what it used to be like in Marysville. Now, I don't know whether it was always against the rules to have a gun in your car at Marysville High School. I was talking to Bob Day, who used to broadcast out of this studio, and he and I were chatting one day as I was leaving. He was coming. And we were talking about going to school here, and he lived out in the country, a little bit just out north of the city limits, and I lived in the city, and we were talking about hunting around here during, he's younger than I am, but I was telling him how I used to be able to leave the center of Marysville and East Marysville as a 13, 14-year-old youth and carry my shotgun and my ammo and walk for the several blocks it was to get out to the city property line or city limits and to the north and go out to the country and shoot, either shoot pheasant or ducks or dove or just shoot targets. And how nobody would call the police. Nobody would think of calling the police for that. But today, if I had a youngster and we lived in East Marysville and he said, hey, can I go shooting? And I said, yeah. But if I didn't drive him out there, if I just let him walk through East Marysville, although it's not against the law to carry a gun like that, people would be dialing up on their cell phones, don't you know it? Dialing the police in, hey, there's a kid carrying a gun down the street. Times have changed. So I wrote this article about times have changed, and I wondered, and anyway, talking to Bob Day, Bob says to me, Louis says, I used to, when I pulled in with my pickup or my car at Marysville, sometimes I'd have my gun. It was just a gun I was hunting with. I'd have that in my car, and there was never a problem. Now, I don't know whether there's never a problem because the authorities didn't see or because it wasn't any big deal. But I don't know whether you remember this or not. I'm old enough to remember this. We had a gun racks in the back of pickup trucks. It was very popular, and you could see people driving down the street with their guns in their gun racks, and they would be traversed across the back window. You could see the gun in the back window of the pickups. And nobody was getting pulled over for stuff like that. It was right out in the open. But today, things have changed. The other thing I was talking about is the interesting thing. I read where the Planning Commission, 9 members were there, and they voted on the River City Phoenix Medical Marijuana Dispensary, and they okayed it. And 2 members, Dave Hobbs and Beverly Hayes, voted against it on moral grounds. I thought, oh, that's interesting, moral grounds. It wasn't that the city council's corrupt, but the moral grounds maybe was that marijuana is a bad thing for people, they thought, and they don't want it in the city of Marysville. But I thought how different it is to even use the term moral anymore, because our version of the importance of morality changes. Like, for instance, in the late 60s, early 70s, people in the city of Marysville, some people decided, hey, let's tear down all those historic brick buildings down in the lower part of Marysville, like bordered by 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Streets and B, C, D, and E. And down there used to be lots of bars, some businesses, but lots of bars. And there were some auto businesses, bars, cheap rooms. And at night, you could find some prostitutes that actually stood out on the corner and hailed you in, just like they do in some big cities. And there were also some good restaurants down there. But what happened is some folks that didn't like all that thought, you know what we need to modernize the lower end of Marysville, and they put it on the ballot, and they said, if you vote yes, that means we want to bulldoze all those blocks. And they did what they call eminent domain, where they bought the properties from the owners. And then what we got now is we have an ex-Mervyn's. Remember, Mervyn's went down there, and now they're gone, and we have Habitat for Humanity. And then we have the building right across the street from it that's mostly empty. That's sort of a modern, ugly building. But we pushed over all these beautiful black buildings and the brick buildings, and the reason we did that is, well, it was immoral down there, and it was seedy, right? So we got rid of the prostitutes, which are bad for the city. So we also got rid of a bookstore that wasn't in the demo area, the demo zone, I call it, but it was a red carpet bookstore, and this was prior to the internet. And they provided pornography. And so you could go in there and you could pay money and you could watch a porno film, or you could buy porno books, magazines. And the city council at that time felt we need to get rid of that. So they forced the red carpet bookstore out of town. In fact, I think they went out of business, and they paid them to do that. But it's interesting now at the city library, and maybe at both city libraries in Yuba City and Marysville, you can now go and get pornography for free on the library computers. And now, although we eliminated all those bars and the prostitutes, now we've welcomed 2 dispensaries to town. It's interesting, right? What was moral or immoral or unacceptable in one decade, now we welcome other things back that for the sake of funding the city that other people call immoral. Well, it's interesting when you think how we got this dispensary, because this is the dispensary, the River City Phoenix, that funneled $10,000 to Mayor Ricky Scamayoa, $5,000 of which came right after the dispensary's appeal hearing. You think, why would they have to have an appeal hearing? Well, there was a rule that if you had a dispensary and you applied to have a dispensary, or when you got your dispensary license, you couldn't have everybody had to be background checked, and you couldn't have anybody that had any record. Well, River City Phoenix had a board member that had a felony. So they rejected their application to have a dispensary. But then River City Phoenix sent $5,000 to the mayor, and then they applied to appeal that they removed. They said, hey, we removed that felon off our board. We didn't really know he was a felon, and now we have a squeaky clean board member. Plus, we gave $5,000 to the mayor, so that should make a difference. And sure enough, it did. So they overruled that they let them back in and let them back in. So it reminded me of Groucho Marx. Maybe if you're too young, you don't know Groucho Marx. Very funny guy. He was noted for saying, these are my principles, and if you don't like them, well, I have others. Or as I say, like the Light Church, L-I-T-E church, like light beer, just 7 commandments, you choose them. So I've talked to people and said, Lou, I can live with or without the marijuana thing. I could handle the medical marijuana thing. And they said, actually, the thing that's worse about this is the corruption at City Hall. So I was reflecting on what happened on this marijuana thing. And so in order to pull off 2 dispensaries, it wasn't easy. The city council had to alter their codes, their ordinances, their zoning. They had to redefine the definition of a park. They violated the Brown Act. They showed favoritism and bias. They participated in pay to play. So maybe you have a problem with the stench of marijuana. I have the problem with the stench of City Hall. The last thing is there was a problem with River City Phoenix because the codes and the ordinances that the city kept making to frame in what it was going to be like to have a medical marijuana dispensary, the codes continually had to be changed to fit into these dispensaries. For instance, the McDonald's, which is going through a remodel right now at 4th and E, had a play area outside McDonald's with playground equipment on it. You remember it? And because of that playground, that made the dispensary out of compliance because it wasn't supposed to be within so many 100 feet of a playground. But thank God, it looks like McDonald's has removed that playground. If you can see their new remodel, it's going to be a very beautiful building. And maybe they're going to get rid of the playground, so it actually was a blessing to all those that want to have a dispensary in town. Here's the final irony that I write in my article, and this is amazing to me. This has happened about, I'd say 15 to 20 years ago. Bob Nicoletti was real good at promoting. He started the Silver Dollar Saloon and Bill's Place, a lot of restaurants, and he had Nicoletti's restaurants. And Bob Nicoletti, I knew Bob Nicoletti. I did some work for him. And Bob Nicoletti used to bring concerts to the amphitheater in Riverfront Park. Now, I don't know whether he brought the World Music Festival, but the World Music Festival came to Riverfront Park, and it was like a 3 or 4 day festival, and people would camp throughout. The amphitheater was where all the music took place, but people were camping throughout in tents throughout Riverfront Park. So we're going to take a break here, and then I'll tell you the rest of the story about the World Music Festival when we return.
See that church? Your great-grandfather helped build that almost 80 years ago. He was a stonemason, the old man. Came over from Avelina with $4 in his pocket.
Yeah, but I saw in a book where you could get a hotel room for like 10 cents a week then. Your room service must have been like 1 or 2 cents a meal.
Room service? Talk about history here, AJ. Your family's history. Newark's history.
Oh, who gives a shit about Newark?
I'm making a point. This neighborhood used to be beautiful. 100% Italian. In the 1920s, most of them right off the boat. Most Italians couldn't even find a church that wanted them. So what did they do? Did they cry? Did they go to the government with their hand out? No. They took care of their own problems. They said, you don't want us in your church? Fine. We'll build our own. A better one. I mean, look at all these buildings around here. Most of them are falling down into the ground. But that church is still standing. You know why?
The bricks?
Because our people give a shit. That's why.
All right. This is Lou Benninger. You're listening to Live with Lou, and we're plugging along here. We got about an hour and a half to go. And then we got some sports talk coming later. You just heard a little commercial about trauma intervention program, and I want to just mention something because I run that program, and if you want to get involved and help us, you can. So things like what's happening in Houston, if that happened here, we'd be right in the big middle of that. So we just finished the month of August, and in August we were out 40 different times and gnarly 911 calls from police and fire and the hospital, helping families to do well. And so the unique thing about TIP is it's all volunteer, and we don't get any government funds. We're just run because of generosity of firefighters and cops that want to help us, and nurses and individuals in the community. So this month, September, we're doing a ongoing fundraiser that's going to happen online. We used to do a dinner, and it got too expensive to run, so we're switching it up some. So if you want to help us make a contribution, where, it's interesting because, everybody's giving, with the hurricanes, like people are trying to figure out where to give, right? I noticed one guy, is it Tyler Perry? Is he a movie guy? Tyler Perry on the television. I think he gave $1 million. Remember, I was talking Joel Osteen. Different people are giving $1 million. Trump gave $1 million. Sandra Bullock gave $1 million. Lots of people are giving $1 million. And so the question is, who would you give it to? And Tyler Perry gave $1 million, or a lot of it, I think, maybe almost $1 million, or most of it, to Joel Osteen's church. I thought, after Joel Osteen got his nose broke by the media, he's got a little help. So it looked like that, photos or videos on the TV, they're handing out a lot of cool stuff to help people. But anyway, you always wonder, what I always do, I'm real careful about where I give my money. I want most of the money to get to the cause, right? Instead of given how much is going to administration. I think they're Red Cross, the national director of Red Cross, I think gets about half $500,000 a year salary. I wonder how come it's so complicated to run Red Cross? I saw somebody saying one day that, I think it was a military guy saying wherever he was with disasters in the world, he thought Salvation Army was a better investment. Salvation Army's people's salaries aren't that big. So in TIP, there aren't any salaries. All the money you give goes to run the organization, or the resources we give to clients, or technology, or telephones, because we have to dispatch people. And so last year, or in a typical year, we put in about 40,000 hours of service in the local area. That if you take the average volunteer rate, national volunteer rate of money per hour, it comes up to almost $1 million. Is that amazing? That if we were to run this program and pay people and do all that, it'd be about $1 million worth of service contribute to the Yuba Sutter area to help people. So we run it on just the crumbs of that. But you can help us by going, you can do it a variety of ways. You could go to yubasuttertip.org. That's one word, yubasuttertip.org. And then hit donate. Or you could go to youcaring.com/tip. youcaring.com/tip. Or finally, you could just mail us some money, a check, to Tip, Box 645, Marysville, 95901. Very simple. Tip, Box 645, Marysville, 95901. So you can help us out. You know, I was thinking when I was talking earlier about the Sutter Buttes Tea Party patriots that meet out there at Church of Glad Tidings, I was thinking about why are we in the state of affairs we're in this country. And it's very simple. We have just sat back and assumed that things would turn out like we hoped they would without doing anything about it. For instance, kind of like thinking, I need a job. And you just keep thinking, I need a job. I wish I had a job. I need a job. I wish I had a job. But you never do leave the house, fill out an app, or make some phone calls to get yourself a job. You never work at it. It's interesting. The Founding Fathers put a lot of energy into getting this country going, getting here and getting this country going. It took 100 years to really get this thing on solid foundation. A lot of people lost their lives. Some lost their actual life. Others lost their livelihood and lost their families. And just over the generations, millions of people have died for this country. Yet somehow, during my time, people have just taken the ease and the laid-back approach and yet whined about things when it didn't turn out right. All those damn politicians, they did that, they did this. Why don't you vote them out? Why don't you quit voting for propositions that lighten the penalties on criminals? Why don't you quit voting for water bills that never produce any water resources? You know, with Tammy Reichard going to do a Constitution course, there'll probably just be a handful of people at that. Yet, then we're all upset when politicians don't follow the Constitution. I just saw where the Assembly up in Oregon passed a law that says they're not going to follow the Electoral College process. But they're going to have the Electoral College, they're going to force them by law to cast their ballots with whatever the national public vote is, popular vote. It doesn't matter what the people of Oregon want. It'd be what the national popular vote is. So they're not getting rid of the Electoral College. They're just changing how it works. It's contrary to the Constitution. But probably most of the people of Oregon never studied the Constitution. So it's interesting, you know, I was at a fundraiser the other night for the Republican Central Committee, and there were maybe, I don't know whether there's 100 people there or not, 150 maybe. And I thought, wow, there's 160,000 people in this area, but there are 150 people or 100 people at a fundraiser. You know, we're going to have to do better than that, folks. You know, when the Tea Party patriots say, we're going to inform you about this, we're having 2 sheriffs come to speak about the Second Amendment. We're going to be talking about the Oroville Dam safety. We're going to be talking about the election coming up and new sheriffs new people want to run for sheriff. And just 50 people show up, 80 people, 100 people. I'm telling you, that's not good enough. And you go to the polls, you don't know jack diddly what you're voting for, and you vote to lighten penalties on criminals, that's not helping us. And so there are some organizations and there are classes that are being conducted to help you educate yourself. If you think that your rights are free, you're going to get your nose broke. It costs time and money to preserve your rights, in whatever area you want them. You better fight for them. In fact, I just had a discussion with a guy the other day that talked about an issue that happened in Yuba County with the Yuba County Water Agency where they denied the people the right to vote. And an attorney said if you had hired an attorney, you would have won that. But because nobody had the money or the desire to hire an attorney, the people of Yuba County didn't get a chance to vote on a change in how water revenues were being handled by the Yuba County Water Agency. And the Yuba County Water Agency think they did the right thing, but they really didn't do legally the right thing. They just got away with it because nobody did anything about it. And that's the way we've lost the schools. We've lost the legislature of Sacramento. It's been on and on and on. Well, I'm going to go back and finish talking about the World Music Festival. This should be fascinating to you. I like music. I really like music, and I like reggae music. I like all kinds of music. I used to play an instrument. My dad taught me how to play an instrument when I was a kid, and it generated in me, although I didn't continue playing an instrument as I got older. It created in me a love for all kinds of music, classical music, rock music, all kinds of music. And so about 15 to 20 years ago, a thing called the World Music Festival came and rented Riverfront Park, and they rented the whole thing. There were thousands of people, tents, campers, all kinds of stuff. There were so many people that I don't remember what grocery store it was just across the levee into Marysville, what they called it then, whether it was Albertsons or Lucky's, or I don't remember what it was. But they came in there, they would clean the shelves off that store. They couldn't keep enough food in that store and water and drinks and snacks, and they were like locusts coming through here buying stuff and hitting the burger joints and stuff. And that thing went on all day, throughout the day and at night for I think about 3 days. And then Friday Night Live began to complain about it because the people were drinking alcohol and smoking weed down there. And they made enough of a stink with the city council that they told them after a few years they weren't going to allow them to be there anymore. Now, I used to go down there, and because I lived right over the levee from there, and I used to just walk over there, and I would go down there and talk to people about Jesus. Because I thought that's where I came from, is that concert group and that same group of people. So I thought I'm going to go down there and talk to them. And I had a great time, and the music was cool. I didn't have to buy a ticket. It was loud enough. You could just hang out around the perimeter and talk to people coming and going. And I found it was a great deal. But it brought hundreds of thousands of dollars in income to businesses, and plus they rented that whole venue down there, the entire Riverfront Park. And yet we ran it out of town, and they moved up to the Quincy Burney area, and they've had it up there ever since. Now, the reason I bring that up is we ran them out of town and gave up all that revenue. And it wasn't that we were introducing people to drugs and alcohol and weed. It was they just came there to listen to music, and while they were there, it's kind of like while they were there, they may have had a burger too, but we didn't teach them how to eat. They always ate burgers, and then when they came there, they ate a burger. And we didn't teach them how to smoke marijuana, but they came there, maybe they smoked a marijuana joint, right? Or a pipe full. But no, they were bad nasty, so we ran the whole operation out of town. The city council did of Marysville. And now the city council is inviting a dispensary to town, 2 dispensaries. And what are they going to sell? They're going to actually promote and sell marijuana. Now that dispensary is not going to bring any business to other businesses like that big festival did, where they literally, like for instance, my friend Stephanie Helms, when for a short time she had the volleyball operation over in Marysville at a big warehouse. They had volleyball tournaments. And the guy at Denny's restaurant came over to her one day and said, hey, can I see the schedule of when you're going to have the volleyball tournaments? Because when you have those tournaments, we need to get more food supplies because your volleyball participants wipe us out eating breakfast over here, so many of them. They fill that place up. Events in town bring a lot of money for businesses, but the city ran the World Music Festival, which has continued on every year and benefited those small towns up in the North State. And then we turn around and welcome marijuana. It just, do you see the oddity of that? I just think, as I wrote the article, Marysville Bud and Bullets. So I'm wondering whether when I go to juvenile hall tomorrow, whether I'll meet this young man who got arrested for having a shotgun in his car. Did you know most people are so screwed up today about guns? I was raised with guns. My dad took me to a hunter safety course when I was 12, and I started hunting right away and packing a weapon when I wanted to. And it was never a problem with law enforcement. Do you know that? We become so liberal and politically correct and anti-Second Amendment that we got a real problem with a young person having a gun. But do you know our forefathers did? I mean, our forefathers just like 20, 30, 40 years ago did not have a problem with that at all. And yet in our community, we would call, it's just like where they videoed Ronald Ibarra and the police officer fighting. People just get on the phone now and call 911 over everything they think they know all the laws. They're like Facebook criminologists. Well, crazy. I wanted to, I was talking earlier about the fact that liberals focus on minutia that are make-believe evils. And one of the businesses, it's interesting to me, one of the businesses, this is so fascinating. Have you noticed how Starbucks is just in your face? Like we're going to hire all these refugees and screw you, Donald Trump. We're going to take illegals and hire them. We're going to, we're anti-marriage. We're conservative. Take your coffee desires and shove it, right? Starbucks. And us conservative folks, we just keep parading through Starbucks, spending all our money, right? Because we just ignore that, right? People just saying, I hate you. I hate you conservatives. And we just keep spending money with them. But if you're a company like Chick-fil-A, who, God help them, they close on Sundays because to honor the Lord and to give their people a day off, a full day off. And somehow, just because they're Christian now, they automatically hate all homosexuals, transsexuals, people that want to have sex with animals. They automatically hate them. So therefore, the liberals, caught up with make-believe evil, then tries to destroy Chick-fil-A and harass them, right? And mock them constantly, right? Torment Chick-fil-A. I get a kick out of it in this latest flood in Houston. This couple, like they do here, they do the same thing everywhere. They announce a flood may be coming, a bad storm's coming. They do it here. and they'll say, I think you should evacuate, or they'll say it's a mandatory evacuation, or it's advised evacuation. But it doesn't matter what they say. There are always some people that will stay behind and say, we're just going to stay. They don't want to evacuate for whatever reason. So this older couple down there in Houston did that, and then all of a sudden they flooded, and they're in deep trouble. And so they didn't know who to call. I love this. I love this about America. So they called Chick-fil-A. And the lady, the manager, got the phone call and called her husband to go rescue this couple. And so they got these jet skis, and Chick-fil-A launched their own rescue operation to get this elderly couple out of there, and then they continued on and rescued other people. Just like, in other words, instead of sitting back and waiting for the government to pull off all the rescues with emergency responders, obviously the government's overwhelmed, right? This is like not a 100-year storm, not a 200-year storm, but what they call a 1,000-year storm. And so Chick-fil-A, man, just got it on. And, you know, the media wants the media wants one storm after another storm after another storm to destroy cities, because then it'll prove global warming, right? They don't care about the people. They don't care about the people that were in the Superdome, the Superdome in New Orleans during Katrina. They didn't care about those people. All they wanted to do is make George Bush look bad. So they made up all kinds of lies about people getting raped in the Superdome, or people dying in the Superdome, or people getting assaulted in the Superdome. It's just all fabricated. All they wanted to do, they didn't care about the people of New Orleans and Katrina. All they wanted to do is put down George Bush. They didn't care they had a criminal as a mayor, Ray Nagin. They don't care about the people. You think that CNN cares about the people of Houston? You don't see anybody at CNN kicking down $1 million or $10 million to help the people of Houston. All they want to do is make political hay out of this thing. So they want to look for opportunities to trash Chick-fil-A. You don't see Starbucks giving $1 million. Just trash any kind of, they want to focus on the shoes of Melania Trump, or the clothes of Melania Trump, or she wasn't dressed properly, she didn't look proper, this and that. Nitpicking everything. Well, the president didn't use the right words. He didn't have his depth of feeling. He didn't have a deep enough feeling about this. He wasn't concerned enough. Well, all right. Just the way it is. All right, let's see. I want to mention also, I want to mention, encourage you folks. One of the things, as I was mentioning the Tea Party earlier, I was encouraging the Tea Party to get back. When I was talking to Bill Beeler here a while back, I was encouraging the Tea Party members to get back to being activists. Having meetings is fine, but it's just kind of like at the Church of Glad Tidings. I remember when I was hired out there, I thought, shoot, I don't know whether I want to work for a church or not. And Dave Bryan says, Lou, we need to get people's butts out of the pews and get them out doing something relevant in the community. And I thought, oh, that sounds good, because I don't like to. I'm kind of ADHD, and so I'm feeling like I always feel like bored sitting in meetings all the time. And so I was encouraging Bill Beeler with the Sutter Buttes Tea Party Patriots to encourage the people to get out at the City Council and Board of Supervisors meetings again and take stands on issues that are important, to let them know, hey, this is the way we feel, instead of just having meetings all the time. And so I just want to encourage you to get involved and stand up for things and go to constitutional classes and step up and make a difference. And so one way would be there's the newspaper, the Territorial Dispatch, which tells the conservative side of things that if you would call 743-6643 and subscribe to it, even though it's a free paper, they'll mail it to you. Like all you guys up in the Yuba County foothills, the Appeal Democrat now they won't even deliver up there anymore. So you go without a paper. So a lot of times you conservatives out there, you don't put your money where your mouth is. So you say, well, I'm against this, I'm against that, but here we have a paper that promotes conservatism and criticizes the government when they're wrong, and yet you won't buy an ad in it. You want a free news release instead of buying an ad, and you won't even buy a subscription. Why don't you buy a subscription just to support the paper? Because I know what you're going to do. Whenever it stops publishing, if it ever stops publishing, you're going to whine about it. Oh, we sure missed that paper. You didn't do you didn't do crap to keep that paper going. You just wanted a freebie. You're no different than an entitlement babe on welfare. We'll be right back. Last hour here, you're listening to Live with Lou, and I'm wondering, how long are we going to hear about Colin Kaepernick? I saw an interesting comparison between him and another fellow athlete, Glenn Coffey. I don't know whether you remember him. There's a lot of similarities. They're both black. In fact, Glenn's blacker than Colin. And they were both born in 1987, Glenn Coffey and Colin Kaepernick. They both played for the San Francisco 49ers. They were both third-round draft picks. However, then things changed. Coffey ended up giving up his millions of dollars and joined the military. And Colin Kaepernick ended up refusing to stand for the national anthem because the American flag represented the oppression of black people. And he continues to make $19 million per year, I guess, until his contract ends. So this whole phenomenon with Colin Kaepernick is interesting, and it shows the hypocrisy of the liberal left. For instance, Colin Kaepernick is now being inducted. Let me see if I can find inducted into Black American Historical Museum, and that museum does not include the likes of Supreme Court Justice Thomas, who also happens to be black and much blacker than Kaepernick. Now, people say, well, we all have freedom of speech. And like I mentioned last weekend, if you listened, not necessarily when you're working. You can say whatever you want with your working, like you can tell the boss to F off. It may cost you your job, but you can say that. So free speech is not without cost or consequences. So there are rules on the job place, right? The workplace. Like if you want to go to work a certain place, they usually have a dress code, a performance code. They have lots of codes and rules. And but there are consequences to your speech. So I don't know whether you remember this guy. His name is Brendan Eich, E-I-C-H, Brendan. You remember him? Well, he was the former Mozilla CEO. And he was kind of the brainiac behind Mozilla. You know, your computer software people. But he was forced to resign from Mozilla by the liberals, 6 years after he contributed a measly $1,000 to support the since overturned 2008 same-sex marriage ban. You remember the 2008 same-sex marriage ban in California? You remember that was a proposition that we voted on, and we prevailed. It was more positive than a same-sex marriage ban. What it was to simply define or restate in the Constitution of California what marriage actually was, the marriage or the union between a man and a wife, or a man and a woman. And so Brendan Eich donated towards that cause. He thought that was a good thing, preserve the concept of a man and woman. He didn't say that you couldn't be homosexual. He didn't say that you couldn't live with a homosexual partner. He just contributed. But if you do that in a country like the United States, where the liberal left talks about tolerance, but they don't tolerate it. Like I remember where there was an ice cream operation. I can't remember their names down in Sacramento. That they're Catholic people, and they supported the proposition as well in 2008. And they were harassed and attacked. And all kinds of Mormon people also were punished and attacked. In other words, you don't have free speech in this country if you're a conservative, if you're not willing to pay a cost. And actually, even a guy that's not a conservative, former Harvard President Larry Summers, you remember Larry Summers? He actually served for a while in the Obama administration. He lost his job for daring to suggest that there might be minor differences in aptitude between men and women working in the fields of what we call STEM fields. There might be minor differences in the way they can comprehend or grasp those fields of technology and engineering, et cetera, et cetera. So he got so much pressure, he had to resign as president of Harvard University. You remember that? And finally, you shouldn't have missed this. This was just in the last couple months. You know, Google engineer James Damore, D-A-M-O-R-E, he was driven from his job for making public the fact that the company called Google is a monoculture. In other words, it's not diverse at all. If you aren't liberal, you can't make that public that you're not liberal. And only liberal thinking is allowed inside Google. Isn't that interesting? But if you're conservative and you just want to have a conservative culture inside your company, of course, now you're intolerant and bigoted. And if you wanted to have a whites-only volleyball team, you're a racist, even though people have women-only teams and black-only teams and Hispanic teams, right? But if it's white-only, you're racist. So, without really accomplishing anything in his life, Kaepernick is getting inducted into this museum for black people that have accomplished great things. Yet other people, probably people like Ben Carson, and certainly Clarence Thomas hasn't been allowed in it. Now, it's interesting to me that even though the NFL is 70% African Americans, ESPN put on a mock slave sale, kind of mocking or mimicking the, what do they call it when they do the draft every year, right? So they now have portrayed that like it's a slave sale. if there was only 5% blacks, how many blacks are there in society percentage-wise? Are there 12%? Now, if we were working on a quota system, the quota system should be satisfied if there were just 12% blacks in the NFL or the NBA. But they're not satisfied with 70% blacks. It seems to me that the whites, if we were working on a quota system, should ask that the percentages should be a little different. The National Museum of African American History and Culture. National Museum of African American History and Culture, that's where Colin Kaepernick has been inducted, along with the Black Lives Matter collection. Isn't that sad? Isn't that sad that Clarence Thomas wouldn't be included in something that prestigious? And even guys like here in the studio, Robert E. Leon Lampkin will be persecuted because he has Lee in his name. Just like the Asian American Robert Lee at ESPN, who could not announce the William and Mary football game at the University of Virginia because of the coincidence that some Chinese people are called Lee. In fact, a lot of Hmong people have the last name of Lee. And then Robert E. Lee, who was a white dude, happened to have the last name of a lot of Asian people. And now all the Asians have to suffer because of the bigotry of the left of this country. And ESPN. Did you know since 2013, ESPN has lost 10 million subscribers? Hold that thought. And you know something? ESPN is doubling down. Their calling now is not sports, but to be politically correct and to be get involved in social engineering. ESPN and the NFL denies that their ratings dive had anything to do with disrespecting the flag. But I'm telling you, the party is over, and this year is going to be really interesting. I don't even watch football that much, although I like sports. I used to watch a lot of sports. I don't have a television hooked up anymore, but sometimes when I go to a restaurant or something and they got the game on, I'm always fascinated to watch the game. It's kind of a novelty. But now, because of the drama, because the NFL are such pussies, and they can't stand up for America anymore, they got to make excuses for America. And like I said last week, they can cuss out a ref and get fined. Just an old ref. But man, they could stomp all over the flag and disrespect our military. People that are getting their legs blown off, coming back blind, damage from chemicals. My friend who I used to live with early in the day died of cancer at 31 from Agent Orange from Vietnam. They, disrespect people like that. He didn't even want to go to Vietnam. He just went because he had to. Disrespect people like that. But, oh, yeah, you can, you wear the wrong socks, you get a little fine over at the NFL. Right? Or if you grab your junk, you might get a little fine at the NFL. Oh, yeah, if you cuss out Goodell, Roger Goodell, you might get a little fine. But, oh, yeah, you can step all over the flag. You can disrespect the government, the military, the police. No problem. No problem. We got you. That's your First Amendment rights, dude. But you don't got any rights you want to cuss out a ref or push up against a ref. All right. Well, did you hear the FBI director, Comey? Did you ever like Comey? Did you ever think he's like, are you kidding me? Like, you know, the guy I liked, the FBI director. I liked old Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover. He looked to me like a scrappy FBI director. Or I liked a guy named, actually, not just because he's a namesake, but I liked Louis Freeh. I don't know if you ever remember him. But James Comey already had his statement that he wasn't going to prosecute Hillary Clinton. He already wrote it out prior to ever interviewing any of the people who are involved in the case. Now, when you start to think that this justice system is a fair system and just trust them, and it's like they say it is, they tell you this, oh, well, this is the reason that happened, and they're lying. You don't know that they're lying, right? Because you're not in on all the facts, all the truth. Unless you get at it another way. Like now, because of all these depositions, because Trump's being investigated constantly and the FBI is being investigated and everybody's getting investigated that has anything to do with this administration, they're now pulling all the memos that show Comey was being, what Comey was doing was being dictated by Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, and Comey had already made up his mind and drafted his explanation to let Clinton off after they found 33,000 emails or something like letting her off before they ever interviewed anybody. Isn't that amazing to me? Here's another thing I wanted to mention to you today before we get to the end of the hour. You know, remember I read you the Dennis Prager quote to start the show that the liberals will make a big deal out of things that are meaningless. Now, I loved it when Donald Trump pardoned Joe Arpaio. Did you have a problem with that? Joe Arpaio, you know, some people say, well, man, he was 85-year-old man, 50 years of public service, much of it in law enforcement. I think he served at every level of government, county, federal, state. And then Obama went after him. It wasn't just like any coincidental problem. Obama went after him. His group went after him at the federal level. And they went after him for asking, when they pulled somebody over and they suspected that they might be illegals, they asked them for their papers. Now, this judge down there in Arizona told them they couldn't do that. But actually, I think Arpaio was following legitimate immigration law. And so the judge then found him guilty. And so Trump pardoned him, right? And all the media just had a big old fit. In fact, liberals in Republican clothing like Paul Ryan, he actually made a stink about it. I thought, oh, these Republicans, there's really only one party back there. But did you know that during the Obama 8 years, Obama made 1,715 decisions regarding clemency, pardons and clemency. 504 life sentences were commuted, 212 pardons, and he released, do you know how many terrorists, you remember all those terrorists out of Guantanamo Bay, out of Cuba, were released, who then went right back into killing Americans? Do you remember any big complaints about that? Some of these people were domestic terrorists that bombed U.S. buildings and killed people. And yet, Trump has just pardoned one person in his first year as president, and there's a big hissy fit over it. That's what I'm talking about. That's what Dennis Prager was talking about at the start of the program. If you missed it, I'll read you his quote. All my life, I've known this rule about people. Those who don't fight the greatest evils will fight lesser evils or make-believe evils. This happens to be the morally defining characteristic of the left, so they'll make a big stink over Joe Arpaio, who served decades and decades risking his life to protect people, and yet they'll give Obama a pass. I don't know whether you're following, job statistics are kind of boring, but I got a kick out of them because I was looking on the Drudge Report and it said jobs last month, I think, went up 156,000 jobs, and which isn't very much. It needs to be better than that. But what they said was that the government jobs had decreased by 11,000. Now, to a lot of liberals, that's a bad thing. But I thought, hallelujah to you. That's awesome that they're getting rid of government employees, because we got way too many of them and they don't produce any goods and services. See, what you need, the thing you need to look for is manufacturing, where people are actually producing something that's of value, as opposed to just being paper shufflers that don't really produce anything that can be bought and sold in the marketplace or a service. So that's a good thing. And so people say, make a big deal. Well, Trump has, he's got thousands of jobs in his administration that he hasn't hired yet. And I thought, great. That means we don't have to pay for those people, right? I don't know whether you've noticed lately, I think we're $20 trillion in debt. So unless we quit hiring people, we need to figure out a way to cut back. And so I like the fact that Trump's doing more with less. Now, recently, last week we were talking about Randy Fletcher with the Board of Supervisors in Yuba County had written a long article that was posted in both papers, Appeal Democrat and Territorial Dispatch, about his concern about the marijuana problem in the foothills. And I thought, this is interesting. I read it. I was really interested in what Randy, because I used to serve with Randy on a school board in Yuba County. And so when we got all the way down towards the end, finally he said it. He said, we all need to support more money for law enforcement. I thought, where's that money going to come from? So there's only two places that can come from. One, supervisors need to take a cut in pay. Like I suggested in an article last week, if they cut their pay in half, they could give that other half to Steve Durfer for the Sheriff's Department, and that would come to five members of the board times $40,000 apiece. That's half. That's $200,000 for more officers or more deputies. The second thing they could do is give each department in the county a haircut. In other words, say 5 or 10% reduction in budget, and give that to law enforcement. They could also, I don't know how it works now when they confiscate tens of thousands, $20,000, $30,000 in cash from these busts, whether they get to keep that now or not. There's been different rulings over that over the years. But with the supervisors cutting their pay, because I know they care about the county, and maybe cutting their retirement, like why would elected officials at the county level ever get a retirement, right? It's like, hey, support yourself, why don't you? Cut their retirement, cut their pay, reduce the budget, because the only other place they can get money is raise taxes on you and me, and that can only come through a sales tax, which that's why I think it's Randy's concept or comment was a euphemism. We need to support extra funds. The question is, where's it going to come from? We'll be right back.
The next time you hear someone complain about capitalism, consider this. the percentage of people living at starvation-level poverty has fallen 80% since 1970. Before then, more than 1 in 4 people around the world were living on $1 a day or less. Today, it's about 1 in 20. This is the greatest anti-poverty achievement in world history. So, how did this remarkable transformation come to pass? Was it the fabulous success of the United Nations? The generosity of U.S. foreign aid? The brilliant policies of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank? Stimulus spending? Government redistribution? No. It was none of those things. It was capitalism. Billions of souls around the world have been able to pull themselves out of poverty thanks to 5 incredible innovations: globalization, free trade, property rights, the rule of law, and entrepreneurship. Globalization means the ever-increasing ability to move goods, people, and ideas from one distant location to another. Free trade is open access to markets and people from all over the world with few, if any, barriers. Property rights is ensuring that what belongs to you can't be taken away on a whim by the state. The rule of law safeguards contracts, assuring that they will be respected and lived up to whether the deal is made in Peru or Poland. And entrepreneurship is the creativity of free people to dream up new products that we never knew we wanted or needed. It's worth noting that in places like East Asia, these 5 things were all made possible by the historic peace after World War II that resulted from America's global diplomatic and military presence. Let me put this in a slightly different way. The ideals of free enterprise and global leadership, central to capitalism and American conservatism, are responsible for the greatest reduction in human misery since mankind began its long climb from the swamp to the stars. This remarkable progress has been America's gift to the world. So, if these American conservative ideals have done so much to lift up the world's poor, you'd think conservative ideas would be gaining strength every single day, everywhere. And not just gaining strength among conservatives, but also among young idealists, immigrants, minorities, and advocates for the poor, all embracing the principles of free enterprise and unleashing its power on behalf of the vulnerable. But this hasn't happened. To the contrary, capitalism is struggling to attract new followers. Indeed, some believe it's destined to fade away, just as it has in much of Europe. According to a Harvard study, only 42% of young Americans 18 to 29 have a favorable view of capitalism. What explains this discrepancy between the incredible results of capitalism and its popularity? Why does capitalism get such a bad rap? One answer is simple. The defenders of free enterprise have done a terrible job of telling people how much good the system has done around the world. Capitalism has saved a couple billion people, and we have treated this miracle like a state secret. According to a 2013 survey, 84% of Americans are unaware of the progress made against poverty worldwide. Indeed, more than 2/3 think global hunger has actually gotten worse. This ignorance has consequences because there's no substitute for capitalism in the 5 innovations that make it work. Years of economic research tell us no other system comes close. Certainly not communism, not even socialism. You need a system that works while you sleep. One that creates the foundations of human prosperity without central planning or benevolent bureaucrats. More capitalism, more growth. The formula might seem deceptively simple, but it works. So how do we lift up the next billion? The answer should be clear. If you really want to help the poor, stand up for capitalism. I'm Arthur Brooks, president of the American Enterprise Institute for Prager University.
I don't want to hear nothing more about women's problems. You don't hear men complaining about their problems, do you?
That's because men don't have any problems compared to women.
And that's God's will, so forget it.
You mean God's mistake?
Hey, God don't make no mistakes. That's how he got to be God. Don't be blaming nothing on God that you women brung on yourself.
What?
Yes, that's right. You don't believe me? Read your Bible. Read your story of Adam and Eve there. You know, Adam and Eve, they had it pretty soft out in paradise. They had no problems. They didn't even know they was naked. But Eve, she wasn't satisfied with that, see? And then one day, against direct order, she made poor Adam eat that apple. God got sore. He told him to get your clothes on and get the hell out of here.
All right. We're going to try to land the plane here today. So, well, I was talking a little bit about these job numbers and also talking about Yuba County wanting to find some more money for law enforcement because of the lawlessness in the foothills where there are thousands of grows. In fact, people are reporting them. It's amazing. Randy Fletcher, the supervisor in the 5th District, that's the Hill District, said he admonished everybody in his article, said, call those grows in. Well, the Hill District, the problem is, a lot of them told me, he said, well, we call them in and nobody does anything. It's hard to figure out why people don't do something, whether there's not enough folks or they're afraid or whatever. But all of a sudden, we've been arresting people left and right or tearing out lots of marijuana up there. But now, somehow we need lots more money. And so my encouragement, government never wants to shrink unless we have a complete collapse in the economy and they're drugged through a knothole backwards and they actually don't have any money to make payroll, then they lay people off. But they always have a reason to keep every funky program they start going. Like all these homeless programs. I just saw in the paper, although I couldn't read the article, you know how they go out and count the ducks and geese every once in a while to see if the number of waterfowl is going up or going down. And we do the same thing with homeless here. And so I saw where they counted up 700 to 800 homeless people. But we're going to spend $50-60 million to give another level of government services to homeless people. We already provide them with all kinds of stuff: free food, Section 8 housing, Social Security, disability, general assistance, on and on and on. But we got to do better. We got to do more and it's not do more out of somebody else's pocket, it's do more out of your pocket. So government never does shrink, just continues to grow. So did you know in December 2016 there were 2,819,000 federal employees? When you add up federal, state, and local government employees, it's 22,299,000. Well, under Trump, there's been a decline. Some decline. And you know what they kind of compare it to is back a few years ago, the number of government employees actually surpassed the number of manufacturing employees. That's a scary thought, because government doesn't produce anything that we export and sell or that we consume ourselves. And so it's a bad sign. On the local level, there's 14,395,000 employees. When you drive around Marysville, for instance, and you look at Caltrans, and you add up all the school teachers, and you add up the city of Marysville and the county, I think most of the people over here are all government employees. Hardly any businesses left in Marysville, right? Sad. It's a bad sign. And the government says there's another bad sign. Said there's an obesity epidemic. I noticed that the supervisors, when you elect them, they tend to get whiter every year, and they buy bigger chairs to sit in. Did you notice that? John Nicoletti, the longer he stayed in office, the bigger he got. Same with Mary Jane Griego. And yet those were the two that were wanting to put a control on fast food restaurants and stuff. They're going to control. It reminded me of Senator Yee from San Francisco, who wanted to have gun control but was selling rockets to terrorists in the Philippines. It's like, we want to control everybody else's food intake, but we can't seem to get a handle on our own. So this latest report said that the obesity, like 70% of Americans are obese, costing us $150 billion a year and billions of dollars in lost worker productivity. Well, you know, to me, the big issue here really about whether people are fat or not or sick or not is because the government, we now have socialized medicine. If all of us are paying for our own medicine and our own health care, whether we are paying an insurance company or whatever, if the government hadn't become the provider and on the hook for it, they wouldn't care what we smoked or what we shot in our veins or how many pills we took or how many burgers we ate or how many slabs of bacon, right? Or how many sodas. But the more they control our lives and take over health care, then they have a right to come in and say, you're not going to be able to eat that anymore. We're not going to allow you to eat that. Like the mayor of New York, we're not going to allow you to buy the big cup sodas. Or we're going to charge you $15 a pack for cigarettes, right? Because we end up paying your health care. 70% of today's youth are not fit to serve in the military due to obesity, being criminals, or being dopers, or being stupid. Now hold that thought. That's a bad sign right there. Being fat, stupid, criminal, and being a doper. 70% fail in one of those areas or multiple areas. That's startling. Now here's the thing where you can tell a liberal wrote this. Adult obesity rates have striking racial and ethnic inequities. In other words, we're not all getting fat according to quotas. And probably whites are causing blacks to be fat and Mexicans. I love Mexican food, but I know when I look at it that food, if I ate that every day, I'd be gaining 100 pounds in a heartbeat. This research said that 40% in 15 states, over 40% of blacks are obese. Now hold that thought, because I think they're only 12% of the population. But 40%, over 40% of them in 15 states are obese. And over 35% Latinos in 9 states are obese. Now that's racist. Somehow that's the white people's fault. Now when you compare that with whites, in only 1 state in the Union are whites over 35%. In other words, now I know plenty of fat white people. In fact, I'm overweight. But somehow, as you can see, they call it ethnic inequities. Racial and ethnic inequities. Somehow, I am causing a black person to operate their arm to the mouth more often than they should. Then it says obesity rates are around 30% higher among adults without a college education and with income below $15,000 compared with other. In other words, people that don't make much and that didn't get much education are fatter. Now that confirms my anecdotal surveys at Church of Glad Tidings when I ran the benevolent operation out there. Because working there 25 years, I never had a person that was skinny ask for a food handout. They were all obese. That's a bad sign right there. So just thought I would just bring that up and bring you. You know, it's interesting when people are broke and out of food, but they're always overweight by 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 pounds. Just something to think about. Let's see. What can I do in the last few minutes here? Oh, I wanted to mention this. There was a report came out about a number of California counties. Let me see if I can find this. Let's see, Menendez. There's a number of California counties that have more people on the voting rolls than they have people that are of the proper age and eligible to vote. Doesn't that sound weird? So let me read them to you. This is interesting because I've been talking to both the county clerks, the election clerks, Donna Johnston from Yuba City, Sutter County, and also Terry Hansen from Yuba County. And they've been talking about new ways of doing elections over in Sutter County. They're doing a trial. They're a guinea pig for a new way of doing the elections. And so anyway, we've been having a lot of conversations, but this group, the Voter Integrity Project, has been monitoring how many people are eligible to vote in the county versus how many people are listed as voters. And so check this out. This is interesting. So Judicial Watch said that there are more total registered voters than there were adults over the age of 18 living in the following 11 counties. And then they contacted the Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, who's in charge of such things. But basically, if you're living in California, this is a state that's not following federal laws anymore. And they pick and choose their own state laws that they want to follow. So in 11 counties, in Imperial County, down south, there were 102%. In other words, there were 2% more registered voters than there were adults over the age of 18. In Lassen, which is up north, in just very small Lassen County. This is kind of an oddity, having Lassen. That's usually a conservative county. They're also 102%. In other words, if you count up all the eligible people that could vote, there's actually more voters than that listed, 102%. L.A. County, 112%. Monterey County, 104%. San Diego, 138%. In other words, they're over. If you add up all the people 18 and above, they have 38%. They're 138% actually registered. San Francisco, 114%. San Mateo, 111%. Santa Cruz, 109%. Solano, 111%. Stanislaus, 102%. Yolo, 110%. Now, most of those counties, all but one, I think, are primarily, if you looked at the registration and how they vote, there are liberal counties, except for Lassen. Lassen's very few people way up north. But they're only 2% above. So the big issue is, I think you should ask, is why? Why is this the way it is? And so I was talking to someone this week on the phone, and we were discussing this. And it's hard to figure out what's going on here. Now, it's up to the county clerks in the state of California to purge those rolls. So when somebody dies, there's got to be a mechanism to take them off the voter roll. Otherwise, the only way to see in a small county like Yuba County, Terry Hansen and I were discussing it. She said, Lou, we watch the obituaries, and if we notice somebody died, if we didn't get a notice on it, from the health department, we noticed that maybe they died out of the area. They were traveling and died somewhere, so we didn't have it in a local obituary. We found out somewhere else. Anyway, we got to find out, and then they methodically remove them from the voter registration. Supposedly, when people move out of a county, then if they register in the new county, they would be, then the system is noted that they should be removed off the previous county. So the problem may be that the mechanism to remove people, or the workers that actually have to do the physical removing of them out of the computer system, they don't have enough people to do this, or they're not getting it done. And so they may get noticed. Like, for instance, Terry Hansen said, Lou, when we notice we get return mail from a person that we've been mailing to, we check out to see whether that person's still around or not, or what's going on, and then we determine they're around and they moved and we just lost contact with them, or they're no longer living, then we remove them. But if nobody's actually doing that legwork or detail work, then the role of voters just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And for instance, if you were married, your spouse would get if you died, your spouse would get your absentee ballot or your voter sample ballot, and maybe just throw it in the garbage, and would never take the time to let the county clerk know that you really died, right? So whatever the situation is, it's hard to tell, but on the why and wherefore. But the concern is when there's these types of numbers, when there's more listed on the rolls than there are 18 people 18 and above, it gives you pause, thinking that maybe some people are voting on behalf of people that once were living, right? Or there's some fraudulent stuff going on. So, interesting deal. The other thing along with this article was that we have a number of counties in California. We have 58 counties in California, and I think there are about 15 or 16 now that have declared themselves sanctuary counties. In other words, that they're not going to follow the federal immigration laws. And I guess they can pick and choose whatever laws they want to follow. So Yuba and Sutter and Nevada and Placer and Colusa, Butte, none of those counties are listed here. However, Sacramento County's listed. So I'm just telling you that this radio station can reach out into those counties. But here are the sanctuary counties that said, hey, we're not going to follow the rules on this this immigration thing. And it's Alameda, Contra Costa, Los Angeles, Monterey, Napa, Orange, Riverside, Sacramento, San Bernardino, San Diego, San Francisco, San Mateo, Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, and Sonoma. Interesting. So there you have it. You just got people deciding what they're going to do with this. And so even though people are getting assaulted, murdered, robbed, raped by illegals, basically, in fact, we have people in this community here in the Yuba Sutter area that have had loved ones murdered in San Francisco by illegal aliens that had been released. And yet, everybody is kind of okay. Well, and actually Kamala Harris said, actually, I saw on YouTube a video of her saying that illegal aliens aren't criminals. It's kind of an interesting thought. Oh, the last thing, there's 2 minutes left. Let me just say this, that Judge William Orrick, a buddy of Obama's, a big Obama supporter, and on the board of Planned Parenthood, has ruled that David Daleiden, who took the recording of Planned Parenthood talking about selling baby parts, Judge Orrick, supposedly impartial in quotes, Judge Orrick, fined David Daleiden $200,000 for legally, although they claim it's illegal, but he did it illegally. In fact, he's done it elsewhere in the country, and no judge has found any fault with it. He recorded a conversation in public, which you can do, with Planned Parenthood doctors saying they sold body parts of babies. But Orrick, you'd think he would recuse himself, but what I'm saying to you is the judicial in this country has gone corrupt. And by the way, the guy that defended him was Steve Cooley, who almost was our attorney general, but Kamala Harris beat him out by a few thousand votes. Some people think that was dishonest as well. So that's it for today. We gotta get out here and let these guys in here talk about sports. We'll see you next week. Be good to somebody.